reports overnight that the Ukrainians have destroyed a Russian warship. They're chipping away at the Black Sea Fleet. Um, this just shows that there is some progress being made. It's not spectacular progress. It's not like it was in autumn 2023, so autumn 2022,
Mm.
when the Russians suffered a real reverse at the hands of the Ukrainians. Last year, the counteroffensive was difficult and didn't make much progress. But it's really, really important that we in the West go on supporting Ukraine for our own protection and to minimize Putin having thoughts of further aggression against Western Europe.
Now, how close are we to war with Russia? Is it around the corner? But with tensions heightened, 90,000 NATO troops will be taking part in the biggest military exercise since the Cold War, named Steadfast Defender. The International Institute for Strategic Studies lost 3,000 tanks since the beginning of its invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022. And just this morning, the Russian warship, the Caesar Kunikov, was destroyed. So let's talk to Lord Dannatt, former Chief of the General Staff, the head of the British Army. Lord Dannatt, welcome back to the programme. First of all, I mean, we've had these rumblings. As I said to listeners the other day, I had my 18-year-old talking to me about conscription the other day, which came as a bit of a blow. How prepared is NATO and the UK realistically for war with Russia? Should we be?
Well, Mariella, good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction. I was listening to your previous piece and I wasn't quite sure what our topic of conversation was going to be.
Well, don't worry, I'll come around to love in a minute.
Well, come down to war and peace, shall we? No, I think you raise a very important point. You ask how prepared we are. I think what exercise Steadfast Defender is doing is trying to demonstrate to would-be aggressors, and let's face it, we're just talking about Russia here, that NATO is capable of putting together a large exercise, and this is part of our deterrence against future aggression. And of course, this is what it's really all about. And there is a price to deterrence as well. And we've been commenting in this country that, yes, all right, we're above the NATO spending limit of 2%. We're probably at about 2.3%. But frankly, that is insufficient to buy us the degree of deterrence that we probably need in 2024 against a Russia that's not just proven to be a threat, but actually is a positive aggressor. So exercise Steadfast Defender is important as an exercise in deterrent and to show Russia that NATO is capable of putting a large force into the field.
At the same time as this big operation is going on, as you say, partly at least, in order to show relevant people, shall we say, I presume Vladimir Putin in this instance, the sort of strength that NATO has, you've got the potential future president of America saying that if countries don't fork out, then Russia should be free to do what they want with them. That's surely a very unhelpful intervention at this moment in global politics.
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, I think we all know quite a lot about Donald Trump, and when he was president previously, he was pretty aggressive towards NATO member states who did not pay their way, pay up to the minimum of 2% of GDP. And not surprisingly, he's back on that theme again. I think where he, in my view, lets himself down is by taking this to a rather ridiculous level of saying, well, if you don't pay, you're delinquent, and frankly, aggressors can do what they like with you. Now, you could say, on the one hand, he's overstating the case to get people to react. On the other hand, you could say, goodness, is this really the language of someone who wants to be president of the United States? I didn't like that language at all. Yeah, all countries who are NATO members should definitely be paying the minimum of 2% towards our collective defence. And I think in the current international circumstances, we should be paying significantly more above that. In this country, 2.5% rising to 3% would be the right sort of thing. And just bear in mind, in the days of the old Cold War, we were paying about 5% of GDP on defence, and that did prevent the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact from attacking. So that's the price of deterrence. And goodness, if you think deterrence is expensive, fighting a war is horrific.
The Russian ambassador has been doing the news rounds this morning and been quite bellicose, and maybe as a result, maybe precipitated in a way by this NATO operation, but saying that Russia is more than capable of the challenge of supplying its war effort, and basically they're going to win. Do you see this as rhetoric, or do you think that we are at a difficult point in terms of the balance, in terms of what can be achieved, unless, the West perhaps increases its support for Ukraine? And, are we back looking at things like no-fly zones?
Well, the Russian ambassador in London would say those sort of things. After all, any ambassador anywhere in the world is going to be the mouthpiece of their own government, of their own leader. And let's face it, Putin is putting his own version of Russian history, his own version of what's going on in Ukraine out for people's consumption. And he's spun the war in Ukraine as, frankly, Russia defending itself against Western aggression, which, as we all know, is 180 degrees from the truth. But what is really, really important, and continues to be important, is that Ukraine does succeed, and it's absolutely incumbent on European countries, United Kingdom included, and of course the United States as well, to go on supporting Ukraine. The war is in a difficult position at the present moment. It is in something of a stalemate on land, but reports overnight that the Ukrainians have destroyed a Russian warship. They're chipping away at the Black Sea Fleet. This just shows that there is some progress being made. It's not spectacular progress. It's not like it was in autumn 2023, so autumn 2022, when the Russians suffered a real reverse at the hands of the Ukrainians. Last year, the counteroffensive was difficult and didn't make much progress. But it's really, really important that we in the West go on supporting Ukraine for our own protection, and to minimize Putin having thoughts of further aggression against Western Europe.
And on the subject of our own protection, just finally, I think we've got something like 144,000 combat troops here in the UK. To my son's point about conscription, what sort of target should we be aiming at? I mean, is that anything like enough?
Well, that 144,000 figure includes all the regular elements of the Army, Navy, Royal Air Force, and Royal Marines. So break it down. Actually, it shows you that the Navy and the Royal Air Force and the Royal Marines are really quite small. And actually, the Army is the smallest it's been in modern times, at around about 73, 74,000. The point about conscription, and this has been a slightly overblown discussion over the last couple of weeks, is the history of the First and Second World War shows us that when war breaks out, we deploy our small, well-trained regular army, and it invariably gets destroyed in the first few weeks and months. And the war then has to be conducted by a citizen army that is recruited and trained and then wins the war. And the question that people like General Patrick Sanders were posing was, have we got the mindset, have we got the thinking that actually if we did get into another hot war, we will have to start thinking about calling up lots of people, conscripting lots of people to be the second echelon, the second phase army to bring us ultimate success, as happened in the First and the Second World Wars. It's quite theoretical, it's quite hypothetical at the present moment, but it's an interesting and salutary conversation for us to have had.
Lord Dannatt, very grateful to you for joining me today. I'll ask you about love next time you're on. I don't want to disappoint you.
Mariella.
Happy Valentine's Day. That was Lord Dannatt, former Chief of the General Staff.